I never imagined that a simple medical alert sign could spark one of the most frustrating battles of my life. But when you live in a neighborhood run by an HOA president like Karen Wilkin, even the most reasonable accommodations can become grounds for war. I'd been living in Meadowbrook Estates for 5 years. It's the kind of quiet suburban community with trimmed hedges, matching mailboxes, and unfortunately, the most power-obsessed HOA board president I've ever encountered. Karen was in her mid-50s, with a perfectly styled blonde bob that looked as fixed in place as her opinions. She patrolled the neighborhood in a spotless white Lexus SUV, clipboard in hand, treating each lawn inspection like a military operation. Most people avoided her altogether, ducking behind hedges, crossing the street, or suddenly taking calls when her SUV crawled down the block. I'd managed to stay off her radar until my health forced me to make a small, necessary change. After being diagnosed with severe allergy to bee stings, one that could trigger anaphylactic shock within minutes, my doctor advised me to install a discreet medical alert sign. It was meant to notify emergency responders in case I was unconscious or unable to communicate. The sign was modest, red and white, no larger than a sheet of paper, placed carefully next to my front door. It was visible enough for paramedics, but subtle enough not to affect the neighborhood's aesthetics. By Saturday morning, that sign had already put me on Karen's radar. I was still in bed when loud, aggressive knocking startled me awake. I opened the door to find Karen standing there like she was serving a warrant. HOA rulebook pressed her chest, eyes burning with self-righteous purpose. "Good morning," I greeted, still groggy but trying to be polite. "Is there something I can help you with?" Without returning the courtesy, she pointed sharply at the sign. "That," she said, her tone heavy with authority, "is a violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the Community Guidelines. No signs are allowed on residential properties, except for approved security notifications and seasonal decor." She flipped open the rulebook, already turned to the section, and jabbed her finger at the page like she was reading me my rights. I took a breath, reminded myself to stay calm. "Karen, it's a medical alert sign. It's not promotional or decorative. It's there to inform emergency personnel in case of a life-threatening situation. I have a severe allergy. If I go into shock, they need to know why." She looked me over slowly, her expression tightening. "You look perfectly healthy to me," she said with a dismissive shrug. "Rules are rules. That sign needs to come down within 24 hours, or you'll face a fine. $50 per day." I felt my patience fray. This isn't a political message or a lawn ad. It's a safety precaution. This could save my life. Emergency responders need that information if I'm unconscious. Karen's posture stiffened, her smile turning condescending. "Well, I don't see any bees around here today," she said lightly, as if that settled it. Karen crossed her arms and pointed at the sign again, her tone icy and resolute. "The guidelines clearly state, no signs. If we make an exception for you, we'd have to make them for everyone. Next thing you know, the whole neighborhood will be cluttered with banners and lawn slogans. It's a slippery slope." I blinked, stunned. Was she seriously comparing a life-saving medical alert sign to some random yard decoration? "Karen," I said calmly, "this is protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's a reasonable accommodation for a documented medical condition." Her smile grew more condescending. "The HOA guidelines supersede that for aesthetic purposes," she said. "You agreed to these rules when you moved in." She tapped her rule book like a judge delivering a sentence. "The sign needs to come down by this time tomorrow, or you'll start accruing fines. $50 per day." And with that, she turned sharply and marched back to her SUV, leaving me standing there, speechless. I didn't take the sign down. Instead, I spent my Saturday digging into everything I could find about HOA restrictions and federal protections. It didn't take long to confirm what I already suspected. Medical alert signage is legally protected, and HOAs cannot override federal law. I printed out the relevant information from the ADA and Fair Housing Act, organized in a folder, and prepared myself for Karen's inevitable return. Sure enough, Sunday morning, she was back. She didn't even bother with a greeting this time. "The sign is still up," she said flatly, scribbling on her clipboard. That's $50 for today's violation, and it will be another $50 each day until you comply. I stayed calm and handed her a folder. Karen, I've done the research. Inside, you'll find official documentation regarding the ADA and fair housing laws that protect my right to post a medical alert sign. I'd appreciate it if you took some time to review this before proceeding. She barely glanced at it before thrusting it back at me. I don't need to read that. Our HOA rules were developed with legal counsel. They're binding. The sign is not allowed. Period. Her voice had taken on that tone, slow and patronizing, like she was explaining shapes to a child. I'm not removing a sign that could literally save my life, I said, standing firm. And I won't be paying any fines for exercising my rights under federal law. Karen's smile evaporated. Her face flushed pink as she stepped closer. I don't know what kind of neighborhood you think this is, she snapped. But in Meadowbrook Estates, we follow the rules. If you don't like it, maybe you should move somewhere a little more, she paused, accommodating to your special needs. The way she said special needs made it sound like I was asking to install a Ferris wheel on my roof. I didn't flinch. I'm not moving, and I'm not removing the sign. I suggest you speak with the HOA's attorney before issuing another fine. Karen's jaw clenched. We'll see about that, she muttered before turning on her heel and storming back to her car. As she drove away, I had a feeling this wasn't over. 2 days later, I got home from work and noticed something was missing. The sign was gone. In its place, taped to my front door in a garish plastic sleeve, was a violation notice printed on bright pink paper, apparently immune to the neighborhood's aesthetic standards that my discreet medical alert sign had allegedly violated. The notice claimed that the HOA had removed the unauthorized signage and that I now owed $150 in accumulated fines. I stood on my porch, furious. This wasn't just about control anymore. This was personal. This wasn't just about rules anymore. Karen's actions had potentially put my life at risk. I immediately called the HOA management company to report the sign's removal. The representative sounded sympathetic, but ultimately unhelpful. As board president, Karen does have executive authority to remove property violations, she explained. If you'd like to contest it, you'll need to bring it up at the next board meeting. The next board meeting was 3 weeks away. I couldn't wait that long. If something happened in the meantime, there'd be nothing to notify emergency responders about my condition, so I took action. That afternoon, I called my attorney, someone who specializes in housing law. After I explained everything, he agreed this was a serious overreach. The next day, he sent a formal cease and desist letter addressed to both the HOA board and Karen personally, outlining the legality of removing a medically necessary sign and demanding its immediate return. That evening, Karen showed up at my house, with 2 board members trailing behind her. She handed me a new notice, her smile tight and performative. Since you've chosen to escalate this matter with legal threats, she said, the board has voted to increase the fine to $200 per day, retroactive to the date of the original notice. As of today, you owe $750. The taller of the 2 board members, a man with a permanent scowl, added, We've also placed a lien on your property until this is resolved. He didn't look me in the eye. That was the first time I sensed someone on her team wasn't fully on board. I stayed calm, though every part of me wanted to explode. Where's my medical alert sign? I asked evenly. Karen gave a dismissive flick of her hand. It's been disposed of as unauthorized material. She glanced at the other 2 board members. You're welcome to attend the next board meeting to request a variance, though I'll warn you, those are rarely approved. The smugness in her voice made it clear she thought she'd won. What Karen didn't know was that after our first confrontation, I'd installed a doorbell camera. I had clear footage of her removing the sign without notice or consent. Following my attorney's advice, I reinstalled a new medical alert sign the next morning. This time, I added a small printed card below it that read, This medical alert sign is protected under federal disability law, ADA and FHA. Unauthorized removal may result in legal action. Then, on my attorney's recommendation, we filed a formal complaint with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, citing violations of the Fair Housing Act. At this point, Karen had gone beyond a petty power struggle. She was now violating federal law, and there would be consequences. 2 days later, I was out in my front yard tending to my plants when Karen's white Lexus came to a screeching stop in front of my house. She stormed up the walkway, her face flushed with fury. "You replaced the sign?" she snapped. "And what is that threatening language underneath? Remove it immediately." I stood up slowly, still wearing my garden gloves. "The sign stays, Karen," I said calmly. "It's legally protected, and you know it." "I am the president of this HOA," she declared, as if she'd just announced royal lineage. "You will comply with our regulations or face consequences." "What consequences exactly?" I asked. "More legal fines? Another lien based on nothing? Or are you planning to trespass again and remove a federally protected medical notice?" Karen's face turned from red to purple. Then she suddenly looked up and noticed my doorbell camera recording the whole thing. "You're recording me, aren't you?" she hissed. "That's another violation. Recording devices must be approved by—" Karen's eyes narrowed, her voice rising. "Recording devices must be approved by the Architectural Committee." I almost laughed. "Security cameras are explicitly permitted under Section 15 of the same rulebook you love to quote," I said calmly. "Maybe give a full read next time." And that's when she snapped, in a sudden burst of anger. Karen reached forward and ripped my newly installed medical alert sign off its post, holding up like a trophy. "There," she barked. "Let's see you explain this to the board now." I didn't flinch. "Karen, you're being recorded right now, destroying federally protected medical equipment. I suggest you put the sign back before this gets worse." She sneered and threw the sign onto the ground, stomping on it for good measure. "Sue me," she spat. "I have the full support of the board. No one crosses Karen Wilkins in Meadowbrook Estates." I reached into my pocket and calmly pulled out my phone. "Then I guess it's time I call 911 to report crime." Her expression faltered. "You wouldn't dare," she said, but her voice cracked with uncertainty. I dialed, placed the call on speaker, and spoke to the dispatcher in a steady voice. "Yes, I'd like to report a theft and destruction of medical equipment. My HOA president has just removed and destroyed a medical alert sign, despite being warned of its legal protections. It's all on video." Karen's bravado visibly crumbled as she stood there, listening. The dispatcher asked, "Is the individual still on the scene?" "Yes," I replied. "She's right in front of me." The dispatcher continued, this time addressing Karen directly. "Ma'am, interfering with medical alert signage can be considered reckless endangerment. Officers are being dispatched now." Karen stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. "It's just a piece of plastic," she protested. "I'm the HOA president." I ended the call and looked her in the eye. "Being HOA president doesn't place you above federal law, Karen. You've been warned multiple times. Now you'll have to explain your actions to the police." Within minutes, a patrol car arrived. 2 officers got out, reviewed the footage from my doorbell camera, examined the broken sign, and listened to both sides of the story. Karen kept insisting she was simply enforcing HOA rules. But that defense didn't hold up when the officers explained that federal disability protections override HOA regulations. She had no legal authority to touch, let alone destroy, the sign. To her shock, one of the officers informed her she was being placed under arrest for criminal mischief and reckless endangerment. "You can't arrest me," she sputtered as they cuffed her. "Do you know how many community beautification awards Meadowbrook has won under my leadership?" The officer calmly shut the cruiser door behind her. "The judge might find that interesting, ma'am. It doesn't change the charges." As Karen was driven away, still ranting about property values, neighbors began to trickle out from behind curtains and screen doors. A few approached me quietly, sharing their own Karen horror stories. Petty fines, arbitrary violations, even warnings over curtain colors or trash bins left out for too long. The next morning, I received a call from the HOA vice president. He was apologetic and clearly shaken. "We've called an emergency meeting," he said. "Karen's been released on bail, but between the legal complaint, the police report, and now the video, the board voted unanimously to remove her as president effective immediately. All fines against you have been rescinded, and we're really sorry. 2 weeks later, I sat quietly in the back of a courtroom as the judge handed down the ruling. Karen was ordered to pay a $5,000 fine, cover my legal fees, and complete 200 hours of community service. She was also officially convicted of reckless endangerment, earning a permanent misdemeanor on her record. As the judge read the sentence, Karen's perfectly composed facade finally broke. "But my real estate license," she whispered, as if only just realizing the weight of her actions. "No one will hire a realtor with a criminal record." Mascara streaked down her cheeks as she sank into her chair. The judge's gavel echoed through the room, silencing her final protest. For the first time since I'd moved into Meadowbrook Estates, Karen Wilkins had finally met a rule she couldn't bend and consequences she couldn't escape.